many of the privacy advocates, they're saying, well, if this exists for everything related to child sexual images, who's to say it won't apply to people who might be deemed terrorist, or the disinformation dozen, if we remember that from another segment. The people who are questioning things about the pandemic, about lockdowns, about efficacy of vaccines, does that mean that they're on a list? We already know that the Biden administration is keeping tabs on the SMS network at individual text messages that are not encrypted and seeing if people are denying vaccines and everything else. We're seeing a huge level of shift, a lot of pressure that's being put on Silicon Valley. Now, is this a move by Apple preemptively? Is it a move because they're responding to law enforcement that's been coming down hard on them? That I'm not sure. The only official statements we've gotten from Apple is actually a lot of confusion that people would be against this. They really don't see that there's a big issue when it comes to flagging material that could be considered child sexual images, child pornography, this kind of stuff. But they really got to be careful here. Because again, as long as you open that up, governments are going to ask for additional backdoors. Governments always want to have information. Any television show or series that you guys watch where the police are involved, what is the first thing they go to? They go to the person's phone. They're trying to get it with the guy's thumbprint. They're trying to figure out the password from the girlfriend. They're trying to do everything they can to crack the phone. If they can just use perhaps this excuse, could it go very far? Could they just say, well, it's suspected that they might have this on their phone, get a warrant, and they're able to go through it? It's going to be a bit interesting to see how Apple kind of responds to this whole thing, because this is it's a path that definitely will change a lot of minds about Apple products, about encryption, about technology, how it's going to be used in the future. We have a growing debate about social media companies' moderation of particular material. There's a lot of stuff that I've said on Joe's program here on The Big Talker where, who knows? I was against what the established norms were of the World Health Organization at the time. Does that mean that my account would have been deleted? Does that mean that my bank would have gotten a notice? Be careful, disinformation, Yaël, is loose. It's this kind of stuff that we have to worry about. There's a reason that we should champion a term known as technological neutrality. We should not have the government choose winners and losers, and we know that encryption is something that saves lives. People use encryption in order to send classified material. People use encryption to send things between their friends and their family. It's something that's vital to the way that the internet works. It's the underlying basis for a lot of cryptocurrencies and the entire digital economy. And to see that this might be changed, might be turned on a dime because of Apple's update is really going to make some heads shake. And I'm wondering what you guys think about this. Really interesting to see Apple here. We'll have to see also what the Google Android devices do with their software. Does that mean that other software, other phones are going to come up and compete? We can only hope so. I think competition is good. Having as many of these companies as possible, delivering us great products, why not? That's the great, beautiful part of the market. It's one thing that we love to see. Hopefully there will be more competition. There will be more people discussing this, and we'll see how Apple goes. But for individual users, again, we can get into some tech tips later, but we're going to have the next segment with Julie Gunlock of the Independent Women's Forum. She's gonna tell us a little bit about social media regulation and a brand new network that she has put together with her colleagues over there that is aimed at smart women who want to fight for their country, who don't trust typical social media channels. Julie's going to tell us all about that network. It's going to be a great conversation, so stay tuned here to The Big Talker. This is Mornings with Joe Catenacci, Yaël Ossowski filling in for today. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned, 106.7.
Tune in on Friday mornings to hear The Construction Connection, a collaborative effort between Joe Catenacci with the Big Talker FM and Cameron Moore, the executive officer of the Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association. You start the conversation and we bring you the answers as we take a regional, in-depth look at growth-related topics and issues centered around the residential and commercial development and building industry. The Construction Connection, Friday mornings on the Big Talker FM.
Hey, I'm Yaël Ossowski.
And I'm David Clement.
We're the host of Consumer Choice Radio, broadcasting every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Consumer Choice Radio is a weekly conversation featuring the latest news, interviews, and expert analysis that covers consumer topics from around the world.
ConsumerChoiceRadio.com.
KO's Coast to Coast Tree Service is paying top dollar for experienced climbers and groundsmen. This is hard work for real men, and we're having a heck of a time finding anybody around here that's not all tattoo and truck, but no tough. If you know somebody from another state with tree work experience who wants to move down here, not only will KO help them with their living expenses, but it'll also pay you $100 cash for referring them. We have an immediate need for real men who can work hard. Call KO today at 910-233-2816 and visit kotrees.com.
I'm State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better state. We are one of the fastest growing and most reviewed insurance agencies in Wilmington. That's because our customers love the personalized attention that we give to you. Let us help you get to a better state by visiting our website at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's Mornings with Joe Catenacci. Yaël Ossowski filling in here. Been a great morning. We're now in hour 3, and I got a treat for you guys. I am very, very blessed because our guest for the next segment is Julie Gunlock. She's the Senior Policy Analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, where she directs the Center for Progress and Innovation. She's the host of the Bespoke Parenting Hour podcast, and she's the author, we shall not forget, of From Cupcakes to Chemicals, How the Culture of Alarmism Makes Us Afraid of Everything and How to Fight Back. Julie, thanks so much for being on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me. I promise my next book will be like one word. That's always such a mouthful. Thanks for saying it.
No worries. It's all the magic of radio. It makes it a lot of fun. So, Julie, I wanted to have you on. I know you've opined on many different topics that are happening in the news, and I think we'll get to that. But you are part of this project that I found fascinating, the Independent Women's Network. So this seems to be a new platform, free from censorship, free from cancellation, and you've set it up along with your colleagues to provide basically a wonderful space where women like yourself can actually engage with ideas and topics, and they don't have to worry about being canceled. What is this about, and how can people who are interested get involved?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. So the network is a new project of IW. The Independent Women's Forum is where I run this sort of science project, and I also run a podcast there. But we wanted to set up a network, and it's a members only group. So there is a small fee. It's $5. It goes as low as $5 a month to be a member of IWN. And I think this is, a lot of women will relate to this idea of suddenly you're not allowed to talk about certain things. You're not allowed to question certain things for fear of not just cancellation. And I think cancellation, the word cancellation can be overused, but there is bullying that goes on, another overused word. But I've experienced this, or sort of harassment, or being made fun of, or being made to feel like you're some sort of Luddite who doesn't want, progress in the world, or who doesn't, or who is engaging in wrongthink, which is, obviously usually reserved for conservatives, but not just conservatives. Now it's gotten to a point where, I have friends who are Democrats. I have friends who are liberals who say that they're even afraid to ask questions or to bring up certain topics. And so I think what we wanted to do, or I know what we want to do, is set up a network where women can talk freely, can really grapple with issues and talk about controversial subjects without the fear that they're going to be harassed for this. And when I do say cancellation, I do think that still applies. I sort of, and y'all, I think you two we're sort sort of uncancelable. Like that's our job, is to talk about controversial subjects, to write about controversial subjects. So nobody can really cancel me because, I mean, again, I'm paid to do this. But when you think about, there are people in my town, for instance, who are real estate agents or who run small businesses like restaurants, or they might run an auto repair shop. I know for certain, I have been told by these people who run these small businesses that they really have to be careful about what they say, because they're afraid it'll cost them their businesses. They feel like there'll be retribution, or maybe that their regular customers will stop coming, or maybe, suddenly an inspector will show up. They're very afraid. And, you can call them paranoid, but I think that this is a real concern out there. And so we wanted to offer this group up to women who feel restricted in what they can and want to talk about, to offer them a place where they can come and have these conversations, the conversations they're not supposed to be having. We still believe in civility and being polite and being kind, but that doesn't mean you can't bring up things that might sort of be off limits in another forum. So that's kind of the idea behind this. We want women to have support. We want them to have good, interesting, thoughtful conversation, grappling with really tough issues. And feel confident and sort of unobstructed to have these conversations with other women who are also looking for that kind of rigorous debate.
So the website is iwnetwork.com, which a lot of people can get into. I'm really interested by any alternative social media network. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think we have all the tools available to do so. I guess, more of not a technical question, but more in terms of building this community. Have you found that people are a bit reluctant to leave their normal social media channels?
Oh, no.
They're not afraid that it's a new thing and they're not going to be able to learn it, or people are ready to jump in?
It's interesting because I think this is a really great time for innovation, because the sort of established platforms are a joke, right? They're terrible. The idea that the head of the Taliban is on Twitter, but Donald Trump isn't, is like, you can hate Donald Trump and you can disagree with everything he says, but just wrap your head about that one. Okay. The Taliban, who throws people off buildings, who sets caged men on fire, who treats women like, I don't want to say dogs, because I don't even think dogs should be treated that way. I mean, this is an absurdity, okay, that we have these social media platforms out there, and Facebook too, and increasingly Instagram and all the other sort of, it's funny to say that these are established social media programs, and social media hasn't been around that long, but look, they're all part of this coalition to kill conversation, to kill free thought. And so there is such a hunger for places where people can, and again, it's not a safe space. This is what we're opening, and what we're creating here is not a safe space. And in fact, when you come here, you're gonna see some really interesting conversations going on today. For instance, in one of our chat rooms, in one of the IW network chat rooms, we have Claudia Rosette, who is a world-renowned journalist, and she is going to be doing sort of an AMA in our chat room on politics, talking about Afghanistan and what this means for Taiwan, what this means for the Ukraine, and what this means for other regional countries like Turkey. How is Turkey going to respond to this? It's really fascinating conversations. And if you think that, we're going to all agree on this, that's madness. We won't agree. And Claudia will be answering questions and taking questions from women. But we on these chat rooms, we also talk about, masking in schools. We talk about the coronavirus vaccines. We have really great conversations on this network. And again, the reason we're having these great conversations is because you can't have these conversations in a lot of formats, certainly on Facebook and Twitter. So, and again, I'm not saying that those you can't ever have the good conversations on this, but there is this risk you're taking of either cancellation or harassment. I've left most of the online platforms that I used to engage in because it's just become many, especially in a dark blue city like where I live, the sort of local Facebook groups and local, Twitter accounts are just, they don't really want to talk freely. They don't want to grapple with these ideas. And so I think this is why we're seeing this kind of innovation. We're seeing these member groups pop up, and IW really is a great organization. We are made up of women who have various opinions on things. We often have these sort of email back and forths where we try to figure out IW's position on certain issues. And what we wanted to do is bring that same sort of situation to women who are desperate for that kind of conversation.
You're listening to the Big Talker FM. We're speaking with Julie Gunlock. She's talking to us about the Independent Women's Network, IWNetwork.com, where you can, quote, connect with other strong, smart, and independent women and fight for a better country. All in on the alternative social media channels. I think this is great. Julie, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, I know that you're having to deal with this as a parent.
Yep.
Thankfully, my daughter is a bit too young, so we don't have to deal with the public school monstrosities. But we're being told every other week that a new expert opinion tells us that we either need to mask our children or we need to have new distancing rules or various things on the vaccines. And that is something that you're a bit uncomfortable with. And I know you've written for many years on science, about the experts, about public opinion. What is the pandemic and the so-called experts and how that's playing out? What does that kind of mean for social trust in our institutions? And what do you think about that evolution?
Yeah, I think that this is a really important question. And I think it is an incredibly, I think the loss of trust in some of our public institutions, and one of those institutions being public health. Okay, so when I say public health, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this, but some don't, public health is sort of the government agencies that make up the healthcare system. So you have the CDC, HHS, and several other sort of smaller agencies, NIH. These are agencies that receive federal funding and do a lot of science research. When those agencies start to get it wrong so many times and then show absolutely no humility in admitting that they might have gotten it wrong. I'll give you an example that's sort of outside of vaccines and outside of masking and outside of this coronavirus world that we're now finding ourselves in. Because I've written about this for years, this sort of flip-flopping on nutrition, right? So you had, in the 1990s, when I was in college, I remember like the big thing was no sugar and no eggs, right? And so they had all these, no fat and no eggs. So it was like Snackwells. And I remember being in college and watching one of my roommates eat an entire package of Snackwells. I mean, the entire container of Snackwells. And she claimed, oh, this is good for her. And I was like, there's still calories in that, right? And I remember telling her like, okay, I know it's like low fat, but you still have lots of sugar and this, and us having this conversation, right? But it was kind of the marketing of that at that time. And this was all guided by, public health saying that you should really have low fat diets, which has of course been reversed now. People are putting like butter in their coffee, for God's sake, right? And then you had like the no eggs. So my father's a big breakfast guy, right? And I always tell this story that for like a decade, my poor father was eating egg white omelets, okay? And like, removing the egg yolks, which frankly is the best part of the egg, right? From all things, right? And then just about 5 years ago, the public health sort of industry comes out and says like, oops, we were wrong about eggs. Okay. After almost destroying the egg industry, by the way, in the United States, like the egg industry reeled from this. The farmers were desperate to get people to start eating eggs. There was all this idea that eggs were like the great killer in America. And this isn't it. We see this with everything out there. We see this with wine. We see this with coffee. We see this with bacon. We see this with deli meats. We see this with any kind of packaged food. We see this with the GMO issue. We see this with organic foods. This same narrative of this is going to kill you. And then, oops, we were wrong, right? And so it started, the loss of trust and respect in the public health sector didn't start with this whole coronavirus stuff and Fauci and masking. It has been going on for decades. And so then something big like this happens, right? And the vaccine, and I have written extensively defending the vaccine development, praising the scientists who did this, and the pharmaceutical companies and the administration for supporting this. And I have written extensively on vaccines in general, pro-vaccine. I've written in the Wall Street Journal talking about the importance of vaccines. But what frustrates me now is this whole narrative that people are just knuckle dragging Luddites and anti-vaxxers if they ask one question about the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, or if they question something like masking. And, I think that skepticism is a really important thing. I think that people should be skeptical of things, and I think they are allowed to be skeptical of things. And so what's turned me off is that people just blame these people for being skeptical or asking questions, and yet have no criticism for a public health industry or sector that has gotten it wrong over and over again, and then again doesn't sort of apologize and get it right the next time. They continue to make these mistakes. I think we, as common people who comment on this stuff, need to show a little respect to people and need to be more respectful of people asking questions. It is perfectly acceptable before you get your 12-year-old son a vaccine to ask very important questions about some heart conditions that have arisen, and especially young boys.
Oh, wow. She's on fire, ladies and gentlemen. We've been speaking with Julie Gunlock. You guys listen to Julie on the Bespoke Parenting Hour podcast. Read her book. We'll link to all of that. Julie, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. I feel great. I feel like I had a therapy session. I appreciate it.
With a customer referral rating of 96%, Two Men in a Truck Wilmington has proven time and time again they are the top local choice when it comes to all of your moving needs. Offering a wide range of professional moving services, including local and long-distance moving, business relocations, both full or partial packing services and storage, Two Men in a Truck is dedicated to exceed customer expectations and reliability, quality of service, and care. To start your quote, log on to twomenandatruck.com or call 910-210-0224.
As Wilmington's leader in restorative and regenerative medicine, the Frank Institute specializes in health optimization. Simply put, we use in-depth evaluations and lab testing to determine the best treatments for each patient. So whether you're suffering from an unseen hormonal imbalance or a simple vitamin deficiency, the Frank Institute is ready to get you back to better living. Call us at 910-679-8534 or fill out our symptom survey online at frankinstitute.com. Because at the Frank Institute, you live, we help.
I want to take 2 seconds to say thank you, Joe, because this kind of work is yeoman's work, and it's needed in this country. You're 100% right, Joe, and thank you for doing God's work and being out there and keeping the message and the information flowing.
Joe Catenacci, weekday mornings from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM, WFBT, New Hanover, Brunswick, and Pender counties.
This is for those who always show they care, who told their kids everyone 12 and older is eligible for a COVID vaccine. Those who explain to their cousins that vaccines prevent nearly 100% of hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19. This is for the ones protecting those they love. Thank you.
We can do this. Find vaccines near you at vaccines.gov, paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
And welcome back to Mornings with Joe Catenacci here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. Coming to you every single morning, 7 to 10 a.m. Joe Catenacci is out. I'm Yaël Ossowski filling in for Joe's seat. And since I'm in his chair, figured I'd bring in my usual co-host of Consumer Choice Radio, David Clement. David is now in on the line. David, how's it going, my man?
It's going. No complaints. Happy to be back on Joe's program.
Yeah, we're the morning show here on Friday. It's a Freedom Friday. A lot of different topics that we've covered. It's been a busy day. Had some great people on. Had some North Carolina folk. Brought in some Europeans, talked to Rachel Chiu up there in D.C., and we also had Julie Gunlock, David. I figured we'd feature Julie on this program and also have her on ours. So we're kind of double dipping on our guest interviews. That'd be fun. David, one thing I wanted to mention is I saw an article in the elite New York Times. Who has the cure for America's declining population? Canada. This is an article by Shika Dalmia, formerly of Reason, now a visiting fellow at the Mercatus Center in D.C. She's talking about the different population booms that happened after World War II and how today we're kind of in a slump. The census has proven that. We see the same that's happening throughout continental Europe. And when it comes to figuring out how we can increase populations, how we can get more people involved in our communities, how can we have more citizens, more taxpayers, more consumers, the answer can be found in Canada. So what exactly is this kind of story telling us, and what can we learn from Canada?
Well, I mean, Canada's just been far more open to immigration than the United States has been, and that's not just under President Trump. I mean, that goes back to President Obama as well. And what that's done is that's helped keep the Canadian economy growing and competitive, because one of the biggest kind of misconceptions about immigration is people think, okay, more people equals lower wages, right? They view supply and demand as in the same way that you would view it for like toasters. If you have a lot more toasters, there's an oversupply of toasters, prices go down, things like that. But that misses really the biggest aspect of immigration, is that people aren't just consumers, they're also producers. So they're making things. And I don't think you could pick a better success story than the United States historically in terms of immigrants coming to the United States and creating, I mean, there would be a long list of the Fortune 500 companies that exist in the United States, major tech companies, new innovations. For a long time, the U.S. was kind of that bastion of making a better life for yourself. And Canada was too, and now Canada is more highlighted in light of what's changed in the United States. And so I think the Canadian example does provide some fairly good examples in regards to how you create a system that evaluates migrants in kind of a respectable way, ensures some kind of basic functional requirements, but is generally much more open to immigrants. And we've certainly seen that multicultural approach work in many aspects in Canada, especially in the large cities like Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal and things like that. So I do definitely think that Canada is a very good example of how the U.S. can try and counter some of their issues with population decline, because that's also a big economic issue.
Oh, yeah. And it is a big one that is impacting a lot of stuff. And if we see entrepreneurship be pushed overseas or across the border because of regulations, well, you're going to need much more of an innovative sector. You're going to need more enterprising people who are going to take that on. We're speaking with David Clement here on the Mornings with Joe Catenacci show. Yaël Ossowski filling in. David, one thing that's interesting in this article, and just generally the difference between the two countries, is that actually you have a good measure of federalism that's thrown into the immigration system in Canada. The various provinces have various criteria. They typically have a quota, and we don't really have that in the United States. We don't have, let's say, in North Carolina, particular quota of 2 to 3 million. Everything's kind of done through the federal government. Do you think that this would perhaps, by getting the states involved, do you think that would make things tougher? Do you think it make things easier? Do you think it would lead to more or less immigrants? What do you think that would look like?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. It would allow for some states to really reap the benefits of immigration, and it would highlight in real time. Look, there are some states that I don't think would be on board with that, but they'll miss out on the economic gains from immigration in the same way that a lot of states like New York State is missing out on the gains that we see in Florida. I mean, that's interstate migration, but it's more or less the same concept. And so I think it would be great. I mean, in regards to Afghan refugees, we saw Jared Polis in Colorado issue a letter to the president saying that Colorado would like to help in regards to whatever that resettlement is, and some other states have kind of hopped on board. If you had a more federalist approach, you would it would allow for some states to be a little more compassionate in terms of accepting both migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees, all the kind of legal distinctions for migrants. And so it could be beneficial. There would be a negative side to that, where there would be some states who would go the other way, which is unfortunate, but that's probably better than what the U.S. is currently doing.
Yeah, definitely. We see that probably in Quebec, my home province, much the same, putting different requirements for language, for speaking, and, you wouldn't have that in a place like Louisiana or Texas or New York. That's one thing I always find really interesting. And when it comes to the immigration debate in the U.S., we always have this idea that the system is broken. The system is broken, and no one necessarily defines it. And that's why I like some of the progressive politicians, because they say it's a wreck, and they usually say why. Sometimes, I think they're totally wrong and off base, but other times, hey, it's like they're trying to prescribe it. So they would look at the system and say it takes too long for applications, people aren't able to immigrate with family members right away, there's all these fees and fines. I know my family, when we immigrated, we had to pay all types of fees, and that's not even thinking about lawyers who have to deal with this. The fact that you need lawyers for this is a whole other thing. Most countries, you don't need that, but it's so complicated.
I mean, you could make it as simple as, and this is to address some of the economic concerns. I certainly think it could be more open than this, but you could literally just do some sort of screening for infectious diseases, some sort of screening for links to criminal organizations, and basically like an enhanced criminal background check. And do you have a job? Like, is there a willing employer for you? Boom. Okay, you're accepted. And generally speaking, I mean, the history of U.S. immigration was far more open than that for a long time. And what's great about it is so much of that is now become part of U.S. culture, and what it means to be American. I mean, the Irish migrants who came. That's look at St. Patrick's Day celebrations all over the U.S. Same goes for Italians in New York and New Jersey. The concerns about migration for Italians and Irish people, it was all pretty much the same headlines as what we see now, just obviously years ago. And they didn't really pan out, or they didn't pan out in the same way that the naysayers did. And I think that if the U.S. were to go with that older approach, and you put in some safeguards, you'd largely reap the same benefits that the United States is seeing with the previous migrants that have fled famine or war or oppression, or just looking for better opportunities, looking for a country where they can make a better go of it in a freer economy and really be judged on their merits.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to think about there, because we don't have to necessarily look to another country. We don't necessarily have to look to Canada. We can just look in American history. And we have to look back to how it was and how many people immigrated here. That's why there are, the largest silent minority in the United States are German immigrants, who all came in during the late 1800s and much the same. And with all the different German names, believe me, I asked them. They don't speak German, but they have German roots and they've made their way across. David, in closing here, another thing I was thinking about is when it comes to the bureaucracy, can things be improved? Because at least in Austria, we have this immigration department, and there was an expose that just came out saying that they don't answer the phone. They actually notoriously reject people just based on their name. It's actually pretty corrupt, pretty bad. Do you think that there's a lot of reforms that can be done bureaucratically to help improve the immigration situation in the U.S., or does it more have to do with kind of the politicians who push the reforms?
Well, I think you do have to reform the institutions of how you process migrants. And the really important thing here is that the more streamlined you make that process, the less likely you are to have people immigrate illegally. Right? Part of the reason why people cross the border through Texas or New Mexico or wherever is because the process to legally immigrate is so difficult. And then obviously you have organized crime piggyback off of that, and human trafficking and some really ugly things. And so by streamlining that process, making it easier to legally migrate to the U.S., you actually make it far less likely that people illegally migrate. So it has that benefit too. And so, yeah, I would agree with you that the need is to streamline that process, the bureaucracy. It's way, way too bloated. Highlight what your key concerns are, screen and address those in the approval process, and then get out of the way.
Cut the tape. Cut the tape. Awesome.
Yes.
This is David Clement. You can hear us tomorrow, actually, on Consumer Choice Radio, 10 a.m. Eastern. David is the North American Affairs Manager at the Consumer Choice Center, doing great work up and down the coast all over North America. David, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we'll be right back here on the Joe Catenacci Show.
Government has become too big, too overtaxing, and is constantly overregulating every aspect of your life.
If you agree with that, tune into Consumer Choice Radio every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM with me, Yaël Ossowski.
And me, David Clement. For an hour, you'll get expert analysis on what the government is sinking its teeth into next, and how you, as a consumer, can push back.
ConsumerChoiceRadio.com.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
Mornings with Joe Catenacci here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. I'm Yaël Ossowski filling in, rounding out your Friday. Thank you for joining us throughout the course of the day. I mean, it's been a slam-packed day full of interviews. Hope you guys have had a good time listening to the conversations. Not as many debates as we're used to, but a good time to be here on the program. Again, you can listen to the full version once it hits in podcast form. You can look Mornings for Joe Catenacci up in your podcast device. You can also go to our YouTube, Facebook pages. You'll find the entire program from beginning until end on there, and you'll be able to revel in the past interviews that we've had. I mean, it started off talking about Star Wars and the things that we can learn about life, politics, and liberty from the Star Wars series. That was with Stephen Kent. North Carolina boy, so good to have him a bit on the radio. He's up there in D.C. most of the time. He's a television star. He's kind of a media star. Great to have him on the Big Talker. We also had Rick Henderson, another North Carolina favorite. He's got a great website, Social Fabric, that is a Substack where he's writing about all things community, liberty, and gave us a little bit of insight into the night markets, free exchange at these markets that are popping up in Raleigh and Asheville and across the state. Saw some very interesting stuff that's coming up out of those places, and something that probably is happening in Wilmington. We don't even know it. It could be the right places. We just got to go find them. But definitely a great convo with him. And then Morgan Rinehart. He's of the Charlotte Neoliberals. We talked about the neoliberal movement, a little bit about what it all means. There's definitely a lot to learn there. It's something that will be a bit interesting in years to come. A lot of young people are into this. Did you really think, and I know we talk a lot about building and construction on this program, on Joe's program, a lot about the construction industry. Did you ever think there'd be a group of young people excited by the prospect of removing zoning regulations and rules? Did you ever think it would happen? I know that for the Cape Fear Home Builders Association, which is a proud sponsor of the program and of the station, something they would love to hear. And there's a lot of people who are interested in that. And just very fascinating that there's a neoliberal movement using that moniker, something that normally would be very negative. But basically giving us a new insight, new political movement. That was with Morgan Rinehart. That was in the first segment. We had Rachel Chiu on. She's great, talking to us about socialism and capitalism and how minority voices are never included in that debate. And we never hear about people who come from Vietnam, people who come from China, people who've actually had to live in many of these areas. We don't really hear their experience. We never really hear their side of the story in these debates. It's the social democrats, it's the democratic socialists. They usually come up on that side, present the information, and get no questions, no debate, and surely not for people who've actually experienced things like socialism and communism in Eastern Europe. So it was great to talk to Rachel about that. Talked a little bit about agriculture with Bill Wirtz, my colleague, Luxembourgish fella. He's got some very good insights on why we should actually be very proud of our agricultural policy here in the U.S. and how the Europeans are aiming to try to export their bad policies over here, joined by a lot of green environmental groups. They're trying to bring us old school agriculture, no use of pesticides, no use of technology, going back to old school. Not something we like, not good for innovation, not good for food prices, by the way. That would cause them to spike. If you think it's expensive shopping at Whole Foods now, just wait until they basically force organic on absolutely everything. That means prices will go up on all your normal grocery items. Definitely not something that we want here. Great insight from Bill on that. Julie Gunlock, for those of you who are interested, who have a woman in your life, or perhaps you are a female, and you think a little bit outside of the box, you're tired of being pushed around by some of the social media networks, perhaps you've been censored or blocked, there's a new network for you. We talked about that with Julie Gunlock. It is iwnetwork.com. Free-spirited, independent women who gather on there, have debates, have conversations, and they don't fear getting canceled. They don't fear getting bullied. It's an entirely new network for that. And then we talked about immigration with my colleague David Clement and co-host. Normally you can hear us Saturdays at 10 here on The Big Talker, and we were able to talk a little bit about the lessons we can learn, particularly when it comes to federalism and immigration. And with everything that's happened in Afghanistan the past couple of weeks and the past couple of days, which you've probably heard about incessantly, there's going to be a new debate on refugees, likely going to be a new crisis in Europe. So this is going to come back into the headlines at some point. And it means that we got to be prepared, and we also need to know the good arguments, and we need to understand what kind of immigration system do we want to have? Do we want to plan? What kind of people do we want? Because the most enterprising people, many of whom are entrepreneurs, are these immigrants who come here, are refugee asylum seekers who come here, provide a better life. There's going to be a lot more on that. And I think David kind of broke it down, gave us some good Canadian examples on there. So it's going to be a beautiful weekend in Wilmington. I know it's a bit rainy overnight for some of you, but you've been able to enjoy the smooth sounds of Big Talker Radio here on 106.7 FM. Joe is going to be back next week. He's finishing off his vacation with his rowdy bunch, his rowdy family. I'm sure he'll have plenty of stories to tell you guys upon his return. And I really got to give it up again for the guest host this week. Andrew Donaldson did a great job on Monday laying it down. He put together great interviews, great insight. His podcast, by the way, is Heard Tell. I don't know if he plugged it enough. Andrew's got to do a little bit more plugging for himself. But he's got a great podcast, not just because I have been on it, but because he gathers very smart people to discuss these issues, to go a little bit behind the headlines. I think he does an amazing job there. We had our own Lend with Ben. He was on Tuesday, giving us some good insights and information on everything related to not just credit scores in the construction industry and everything related to permits, but actually had a couple of good back and forths with our own TK Turbo. So definitely love that part. That was fun. Then we had Objection to the Forum. We had Justin on Wednesday. This guy knows how to break down the legal stuff, talked about the mask mandates in North Carolina, how they're legal, if they are legal, will they ever be legal, will vaccine passports be legal? He did a very good job there covering that. And Lillian Beecroft on Thursday, just some great insight, more about faith and community and politics. She's definitely very passionate and provided some great commentary here on the radio with some great interviews. For my part, guys, that kind of does it for the week. Pleasure to be with you all here on this Freedom Friday. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. I'll be back next week, but you can hear me and my colleague David. You'll hear us on the radio tomorrow at 10 a.m. Here on the Big Talker, we'll be talking all things she-covery, the she session. That's what we heard Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau say. We have to make sure that the she session turns into a she-covery. So Dave and I talk about that, talk about some of the things happening in Afghanistan, a lot of the lockdowns in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, this stuff is getting a bit insane, a bit crazy. I know there's a lot of stuff that we deal with here in this country as Americans, but I'll tell you, I don't think we would really fall for what they're doing in Australia and New Zealand. It's a whole other level, but that's why the flag always flies high here in the United States of America. It flies high in Wilmington, and it definitely flies high here at Big Talker 106.7 FM. Go to the website, guys, bigtalkerfm.com. Check out the schedule. There's all kinds of great local programming all week long that you can find. All the podcasts and videos. Check out the YouTube. Check out the Facebook. There's so much great content that we're putting out. Pleasure to talk to you guys. I'm Yaël Ossowski signing off for the week. Mornings with Joe Catenacci here on the Big Talker. Hope to talk to you guys soon. Have a great weekend.